Um, Great week of Big 12 action, really. We have, I think we learned a lot about the conference this weekend. We'll just start with the first game of the week. A game that you and I both sat on here last week and said we're going to learn a lot about these teams this week. Kansas and West Virginia. West Virginia pulls it out. Kansas hung in there. Weird game with the weather delays. But West Virginia battles it out. Kansas 1-3. Who would have thought?
Really rough weekend for the Sunflower State. We'll talk about K State in a little bit, but for West Virginia, it feels like vindication. They're fine.
They're fine.
Where Penn State's not a bad loss. Violent loss against Pitt week 3. That was just a tough loss in a very winnable game. And they lose at home Saturday, Brandon. You feel like the season's off the rails. And we talked about in the preview last week that the loser of this game, you feel like the season's off the rails a little bit. Kansas is in that boat currently, but for West Virginia, I'm going to focus on them more. Great win, a needed win. They found a way to get it done. It wasn't pretty, but that fourth quarter, Brandon, what a touchdown late. I mean, Green hits that pass to Gallagher, final minute. And boy, I mean, Kansas looked like they were in good shape, but 2 late touchdowns, 3:27, and then 26 seconds left there to score 15 late ones and steal one against Kansas. So a pretty demoralizing loss for Kansas. And for West Virginia, a potential season-saving run that final 5 minutes. So for West Virginia, good win. We talked about how tough their schedule is going forward. I believe the last show, like their October is a gauntlet.
It's tough.
They
They got a
needed
bad
that
draw.
win. They needed that win, and it keeps them. I don't know what that win loss total is going to look like, Brandon, but they will get a bye week this week, and then again, Oklahoma State at Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State at Arizona. Your month of October. Look, they can go 2-2, Brandon. I'd call that a big win.
That's a
You
big
go
win.
four and
Yeah.
four into a little easier, November schedule. They should be a bowl team. I still think they can be a bowl team if they go 1-3 in that stretch, no question. But we'll see what they're made of in October. They're still a good team. Like I'm not expecting for Iowa State to go there in October. I'll say that bluntly. They are a good team and they have some very creative players.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think Arizona's looking a lot easier of a game than if you can steal one of those other three. I think West Virginia's going to be in good shape. A team that's not in very good shape at all is Houston. Shocker. They get shut out by the powerhouse in Cincinnati, 34-0. Cincinnati's looking kind of nice. I mean, it's Houston, but they're still sitting at 3-1. And I think Brendan Sorsby is higher on like quarterback rankings in the Big 12 than we would have had him at the beginning of the year. He's been very solid for the Bearcats this year.
Yeah, and Corey Kiner had a nice game. He has a 78 rushing. They really forced some turnovers, 3 turnovers on the day. There are fumbles recovered, interception as well. For Cincinnati, boy, what an encouraging result, Brandon. I've been tough on Cincinnati in the offseason. I've been
Yep.
tough on them during the regular season, I think, at times to begin, where I felt they compete well. But just same with West Virginia. Had a very winnable game against Pittsburgh, just could not get it done. But you know what, Houston, I didn't know what to expect on Saturday because they competed well against Oklahoma, lost, but they competed well. Very encouraging week 3 result, finally get a win. And that offense, look, we'll see going against Iowa State this week, but I'll say bluntly, that's a bottom 3 offense in the Big 12, and they've already been almost shut out twice, shut out
Yeah.
once. I will say that's the worst offense currently in the Big 12, and they can prove me wrong this week. I know what I'm doing against going up against my team, but they got to figure out offense. Again, you and I sing the praises of Coach Fritz. I'm going to continue to sing the praises for him,
Yep.
but after 2 positive steps, I felt back-to-back weeks. I thought, make it a football game, and if you lose, just compete. They
And
didn't
win.
compete. They didn't compete at the level they need to. Let's go with that.
No. Nope. Brighter days are ahead for Houston, but not today by any stretch of the imagination. Next game, we both had this on our highest confidence level. Ohio State, or not Ohio State. They look like Ohio State, but Iowa State taking care of Arkansas State
Yeah.
and Jack Trice 52-7. That is That's great. Great stuff. No notes.
Boy, what's it like to just cruise on a Saturday, Brandon? I'm not used to this.
Yeah.
Usually, Iowa State kind of struggles in these games. There was no doubt on this one. The running attack was freaking awesome, Brandon. We had 5 rushing touchdowns on the day from 4 different players. Beck had a couple of passing touchdowns. It was fun. Defense looked really good. Want to give a big shout out to Adium Adele legend Aiden scout team quarterback all Brandon, and he found the game midway through the fourth quarter, got a touchdown. Called a couple years of his games, and
Very
he's
cool.
a good kid, and really happy for him. But for Iowa State, boy, they did exactly what you hoped for. After an emotional win 2 weeks ago, they got a week off, a good, actually pretty good time bye week this year to kind of let those emotions fade away, and then really a pretty clinical week this week. And boy, if you're an Iowa State fan, it's hard not to feel good going into Big 12 play. And anything can happen, of course. Like, of course, always repping my team, but boy, they really look like an interesting player come conference time. No question about that.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa State beat Arkansas State like Arkansas State, and you love to see that, especially because historically Iowa State, like you said, does kind of slip up in those games. Maybe not pick up a loss by any stretch, but next up, Texas Tech, Arizona State. Another game kind of like we had talked about with Arizona, with West Virginia and Kansas. Both of these teams have showed flashes of good. They've also showed flashes of very bad. So now this is a battle of who's going to get the momentum. And shocker, here comes Texas Tech. After just a horrid start, they beat up on Northern Texas in an unbelievable way. And they get a big win against Arizona State at home. So maybe they're back. I don't know. I'm falling for it again.
You know, what hurts Brandon is I know I picked Arizona State, so I think Brandon Shanahan's going to have the lead. I get the feeling come when we take a look at our standings for our poll this week. That remains to be seen. Arizona State, I didn't feel like bad. I thought they competed. I mean, they had some turnovers, but um, you know, look, I love Taj Brooks. I think he's a tough running back. I believe I got him in my fantasy draft from a long time ago. I think he's a top 3 tailback in the Big 12. I think he's terrific. Uh, look, Tech, they are the ultimate Jekyll and Hyde team. I can't figure this program out, Brandon, because just when I think they're out, they draw me back in, and now I'm starting to build confidence with them again, and that's a problem because now I'm going to feel like I'm going to have to pick them now, and the moment I pick them, they're going to burn me. I
That's
guarantee
right.
it. That's just guaranteed. But they're a good. I mean, they showed they're a good team. Arizona State, not a bad loss. They're fine. Don't
Yeah.
worry about that one. They've competed well. Didn't go their way Saturday, but they have nothing to be ashamed about there.
Yeah. Everything's right in front of them. Let's take a look. Up next, we got now we're really kind of getting into the bulk of the great stuff that came from this weekend. Lots of good that we just talked about, but I mean these what was it 4 games? I mean this really made the conference slate here. We'll get started. Just chronological order. Utah making the trip to Oklahoma State. Utah with their backup quarterback Isaac Wilson came in, did well. Alan Bowman gets benched. Didn't see that coming. Not because I didn't think Alan Bowman was going to be, bad, but that's not a Gundy move, is to make a quarterback switch in the middle of a game like that. But Rangel got some reps in. They ended up going back to Bowman, making a run late. So the score was closer than I think the game actually ended up being. But Utah picking up an impressive win against Oklahoma State, and I feel like Oklahoma State kind of got exposed for what I thought they were going to be, and that's a very talented team, a very gritty team, very well coached team, but with limited quarterback play in a conference that's really good at the quarterback position.
Let's give Utah a lot of credit, Brandon. Their defense played great on Saturday. That's an experienced quarterback in Alan Bowman. That's a 7th-year college football player, and for to have him benched, and he did play a very good late fourth quarter. I mean, he definitely started slinging it a little bit. Maybe the offensive coordinators finally made the adjustments they did too, but let's give Utah a ton of credit. And their fan base is their fan base, Brandon, but maybe they earn the right to talk at least for a little bit.
Yeah,
That's a great road victory for them. I think it does solidify them, especially with K State's loss. I think They are top dog in the conference right now, and not that there aren't some light contenders. Even my beloved Cyclones might be thrown in there, but big win for them. I think they got to continue to just trust that running game. And I mean, Cam Rising, look, he didn't even get the start. You know, they didn't even start him. He didn't play, Brandon. And for them to have a backup, go in there, rely on Bernard, rely on that defense, and find a victory. Utah, give them a ton of credit, and they are the team. I think I'm keeping an eye on them, probably the strongest. Not that there are only other contenders come August or October, but they definitely have the highest shot if they don't win the Big 12 like championship game and get that auto bid. If they can just take care of their business during the regular season, Brandon, Utah should be an at-large team.
I think so too, and I think that's the best path for the Big 12 is they probably have to go 12-0 regular season. 11-1 might get you in because it'll be interesting to see what they do with conference championship losers. Like, do they punish them for getting that second or third or probably not fourth loss? By
Right.
that point, we're probably toast. Or do they contextualize them like, well, how can we put a team with two losses ahead of them just because they didn't get to play? So that'll be interesting. But I think that is the path is that maybe Kansas State figures it out. They get the automatic bid, upsets Utah and Arlington. So I think that's probably the best path. But that's kind of the way that it's looking like it's shaping up with Utah. It seems like there's some separation now, especially from what we saw from some of the other contenders, south of Ames this week. Is that it's Utah's show. It's especially with a backup quarterback. That's really what they were lacking last year. Is that they had all these great pieces. Kyle Whittingham, unfortunately, is a really good coach. It's a bummer, but it's reality.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
um, and when you have to start a pig farmer against the Dylan Gabriel and Shadur Sanders and the great Pac-12 quarterbacks from a year ago, Cam Ward, you get a beat up on USC and Caleb Williams. It's just not going to cut it. But Isaac Wilson looks like he's going to be the future looks bright in Salt Lake City, unfortunately.
It does. And as long as Whittingham is their coach, Brandon, that's just going to be a contender every single year, I think, in the conference. I do. I think he runs a good program. Maybe I think
Yeah.
great terms in just of their what they're about, their ethics. They work hard. They execute at a high rate. They're a good program, though. And Utah's not an easy place to win historically. They've had some good teams in the past, but it's not an easy place to win. They've oftentimes been a recruiting disadvantage. Let's go back to their conference, Pac-12. When you got to recruit California and you've got all those California schools already there, and then you've got Oregon and Washington also trying to poach players, that's not easy. And they're able to
Yeah.
beat them all on a pretty regular basis. So there's a reason they have found success in the Big 12. And yes, their fan base is brutal. And boy, I do look forward to when I was going to get the crack at them in November on that single win. But I do look forward to that game. Long time from there, and Utah did their job. It's a big win on Saturday for them, and boys, that table potentially setting up real nicely for them going forward.
Let's see here. So one of my biggest surprises, and then just overall narrative game. The reason I love sports Dressel is because of the stories that you get to tell. I love that they just come together so organically. And I'm a TCU fan. I like TCU. I root for them. But credit where credit's due. A coach who leaves the school to go to their number one rival about 45 minutes away. Year one goes to a national championship, and it looks like, oh my gosh, he left this program in the dust. He's immediately elevated TCU to new heights they've never seen before. And then for him to come into Dallas, get blown out early and often, and then to get ejected, which I saw was the first time ever that a coach has been ejected like that in college football since they implemented the two unsportsmanlike conducts equal ejection rule. To get ejected, and then to also continue to have your team get blown out while you're in the locker room twiddling your thumbs. I mean, that had to have been the best day for SMU fans since the death penalty. And maybe I'm naive. I don't know SMU like that, but I feel strong about that.
You give up. I mean, final score is 66-42. To give up that many points defensively, and yes, the offense did have some turnovers that put them in a couple bad spots. I'm not going to discount that, but 66 is inexcusable in a rivalry game. I may add at that, and it's not that. Look, TCU is not afraid of a shootout. They've had some wild ones in the past under Coach Dykes. They've had some ones free with Gary Patterson. And that's a defensive-minded coach, I may add in Coach Patterson. But this is, to put bluntly, an embarrassing loss for TCU. I don't know how else to put it, Brandon. I mean, and you put it in the text to me Saturday. Coach Dykes, I mean, he left SMU. He said, "I'm no more Dallas. I'm going to Fort Worth." And SMU, I think, he's thinking, hey, this is a more stable situation in the Big 12. SMU was kind of on an island a little bit on the AAC. They got a little bit of a gift going to the ACC with that invitation. They wanted that Dallas market. And you know what? They made the ACC look pretty smart on Saturday because they really took it to TCU. And for TCU, considering they were just in a national championship game 16 games ago, just 16, Brandon. It shows how demoralizing, though, when that big stage loss happens. They lost to Georgia pretty badly, can do to a team. I saw Florida State almost lose to Cal last night. Florida State was this close to going to 0-4. And that's a Florida State team that went 12-0 last year, 13-0, excuse me. And yes, should have made the college football playoff. No question about it. Didn't. And bowl game, they had some guys sit and they got demolished by Georgia. I thought, how does that affect their psyche next season? It's clearly killed it. That offseason clearly did not do anything for that team. They got much worse. They're 1-3. Should be 0-4. And I think it's the same with TCU. I don't know if it's a psyche thing. I don't know if that national championship game did something to the program. I don't want to go that far yet, Brandon, because I really respect Coach Dykes. I really respect that offense. There's a lot of time to clean up. You cannot give up 66 ever, especially to a rival.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see here. Steven Johnson's a Fort Worth writer that I follow, and he said the vibe is that it would have to take something disastrous like a 2 or 3 win season for Dykes to be under any sort of hot seat. But he's got to have there's got to be some changes, and it's interesting to hear Dykes talk about this game because he reflected back on their loss against Colorado last year. He felt like those guys never really recovered from that, and that shows. They won 5 games that year. Huge letdown, even in an expected rebuilding year with losing all that national championship talent. Expected them to take a huge step back. Not that huge. Not a what is that? A 7 win differential year over year. And he kind of alluded like I thought that the UCF loss when you blow that big of a game at home that has the same kind of potential. I mean, you really got to wrap that in. Got to figure out your coordinators. Somebody pointed out that once Kendall Briles gotten the plane to Fort Worth, nothing good has happened for TCU since maybe. And I think when you get to a national championship game as a coach, you get a mulligan. 2 mulligans is using up all your brownie points there. So we'll see what happens. I like Sonny Dykes. I think the best case scenario for
Yeah.
TCU is Sonny Dykes to figure it out because I don't think TCU's in a great spot to compete with some of these bigger jobs for coaches. Florida's going to be open this year. Florida State might be open in a couple of years,
Yeah.
depending on how that goes. It's an interesting spot. I want Dykes to do well, but also now it is coming to the point where Dykes might not be the answer.
Yeah, I don't want to go to the point that we're going to fire the man after this season. I think you and I would be pushing too much. I think to do that
I
because he's
think so.
done so much good for TCU. Because when he took over to Coach Patterson, they definitely no one knew what to expect. I mean, Gary Patterson is the reason that team found a way to the Big 12 15 years ago. That was a significant win for TCU when that initial conference realignment happened. And Mizzou leaves, Nebraska leaves, Colorado leaves. It's like, what's going to happen in the Big 12? Are they going to make it all that? They survived, and then TCU, they needed a 10th member. They needed a member. And TCU was that initial invite. That's a big deal. That was a big deal at school. It's really changed the trajectory of everything with Gary Patterson. So when he retired after the 2021 season, we'll go with that.
That's a
They
nice
showed
way
a
to put
lot
it.
of respect. Yeah, well, and they should show respect to him. He's an
That's
all-time
right.
coach for that program and a really good college football coach historically. But it was time, and Coach Dykes came in with a new mindset of, hey, we're going to go more offense and defense, and boy, he hit the jackpot. I mean, he really did. You get Max Duggan with an all-time season, Council Bluffs legend. Shout out Brandon Shanahan in the Omaha area.
That's right.
Um, they struck gold. They struck gold, and it didn't, keep going. I thought it would bouncy despite the lost national championship game. I thought, hey, they did, beat Michigan in the national semis. That was a pretty impressive win. I didn't go their way national championship game. It wasn't close. It was a terrible game, but
Only team to beat
something
JJ
about that game, I
McCarthy.
don't know if it. I mean, credit where it's due. They did their job. I mean, they really did. There's some of that loss that I think just it's killed their psyche, Brandon. Maybe it just hit me this week because I feel like last season we both gave them a healthy mulligan, as you mentioned. I think it was a fair mulligan. It was a very emotional 2022 season, but this is a trend you and I don't like. But there's a lot of football to go. It's just they need a running game too. Hoover's a great quarterback. He really is. They got good
Very good.
wideouts. I'm not saying these tailbacks can't make runs, but them in that offensive line, they've got to sync better in cohesion and find some more holes to run through.
I don't know how to introduce this game. So I'm just gonna Baylor, Colorado. What a boy! Cascading. I don't know which fan base has it worse. The team that we just talked about in TCU, the one that we're about to talk about in Baylor, or the one that we're about to talk about with Kansas State. I mean, what an all-time just sickening moment if you're a Baylor fan. This would be a pretty big win for them on the road. Randy, you've
Huge
seen
win.
you've seen the improvement through non-con. You have a tough loss against out of conference for Utah, and then you go up to Folsom and you give it to them pretty good. That defense looked really good. They had a lot.
Oh,
They put
man.
together a lot of good drives on offense, and it looks like boy, you 2 seconds on the clock, you're up a touchdown, and you find a way to lose that game is very. It's got to be gut wrenching.
I thought Dave Barneda had a great game plan. I
So
really
too.
did, Brandon. That defense had 8 sacks. 8.
That's
Colorado got
plenty.
pulverized on that offensive line. And as mad as I am at Shadur Sanders still in the offseason, ripping them and kind of like ripping his offensive line, like they're not
He had a
good.
point. He was right.
Maybe he had a point, but then again, that's kind of on your dad also to maybe go get guys. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
See those bullets fly by. Anyway, or tomatoes. Tomatoes. We're a family friendly show. Um, but it's interesting, like how everything plays out though, Brandon, because they had Colorado, and I still don't even know if Colorado's good. I mean, that was a they should have lost, but my goodness, how do they entertain you week in and week out? Like if you're looking for entertainment and interest, they just keep producing. I don't know what it is about them, but it's impossible. Even if they don't look great, it's impossible not to watch. And people are mad they
That's the
stormed the
problem.
field. You know what? Forget it. I don't have a
Yeah.
problem with it. That was such a bizarre win. And that is a program that's not a well, in the 90s, I know they were great. I know in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, they were a good program. But they've been very bad for 20 plus years. They earned the right. I had no problem with it. And I don't know how they do it. Sanders, that was an all time moment, though. And then for Hunter to get that play at the end to force that fumble, go out, which I don't know why Baylor players are like touchdown, which that was the funniest part of that clip to me. But
They had
whatever.
me fooled.
Maybe know the rules.
They had me fooled. I
You
was
gave
down
a
at my TV. I'm like,
particularly
that's a
touchdown. I'm
touchdown.
like,
That's a
why?
touchdown. I'm
Why?
like,
Are they like I was? That was the funniest part of that clip. But what a win, Brandon. I mean, and you're stunned too. We're both stunned.
yeah, it's crazy. And when we did our pick 'em last week, we kind of had this. We kind of thought this was coming. Was like, I think Baylor's going to be better defensively. I think Colorado's offensive line is still among the worst I've ever seen. But I have this feeling that Colorado's going to find a way to win, and they do, and that's exactly what they did. Travis Hunter had a Heisman moment, unbelievable. I, as a fan of a team that has had to play Travis Hunter twice, I'm very happy that we don't have to think about that ever again. So I'm hugely thankful for that. Um, Storming the field. So first, I'm always pro storming the field. But I think specifically in under two circumstances, of course, you get the big upset, the big program changing win, or like if the win rocks, if there's a huge climax, if there's a huge walk off win. I mean, I'm thinking that they got some flack last year for that Colorado State double overtime game. I'm sorry, yeah, you probably don't want to storm the field against a Mountain West team. That game rocked. That ending rocked. If I'm standing there in the student section at midnight after having seen that game, I'm losing my mind. Same thing with that game. I see a Hail Mary. I see Travis Hunter. I mean, knock the ball out. I'm storming the field. I'm sorry. That's a no brainer to me. Although if you see me on Twitter, I probably will point out the fact that yeah, you stormed the field against a Baylor team. Whatever, get some standards. But
Well,
yeah,
first
they
off,
found a way
ladies
to
and
win.
gentlemen, before we get back to more Big 12, we just want to congratulate Brandon Shanahan on surviving his little jail sentence in Twitter X,
Yeah,
whatever that's called. Brandon Shanahan,
back
he's a
free.
survivor this weekend, ladies and gentlemen. I am so proud of Brandon Shanahan.
Um, I so I make jokes about being chronically online, especially like college football related. I'm surprised with how much of a hard time I had not being able to tweet. So I woke up this morning, checked, was like, all right, the restriction's been lifted. By the way, that was the silliest restriction I've ever seen. It's very funny, and like I'm glad I didn't like get in any real trouble or lose access to my account. But uh, very silly stuff. But yeah, it was an anticlimactic Saturday. I had to talk with the family. I was like, all right, well, I guess I can't just be on Twitter the whole day. It doesn't do anybody any good. But especially with the college football games going on, I mean, what a bad day to be suspended from Twitter.
Oh, terrible day, but it makes the story even funnier though. I mean,
Yeah,
just Big J journalist didn't like what you had to say. That's just part of life, Brandon. That's just part of your
I
aura,
guess
your
so.
your mystique. I mean, seriously,
Yeah,
I don't know. I
yeah,
just
I
thought
thought
it was very funny. You
it was
texted
very
me that
funny.
I lost it. I bursted out. I did.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a very good bit. I'm happy to be back on the Bird app. We're back. Colorado gets the win, unfortunately. Also looking here, final game of the week,
Ooh,
Kansas State and BYU. Again, a
ooh,
game I didn't expect by any stretch of the imagination. This was almost like one of my stronger picks, and we both missed on the pick 'em. But a
yeah.
38-9 win for Brigham Young University over Kansas State. Avery Johnson looked exactly like what I would imagine like the floor is for him as far as when he gets behind, is he able to push the ball downfield? He had some horrible interceptions. I mean, he looked bad. And it was funny because I did see some Kansas State fans specifically poking fun at Oklahoma State. I was like, I watched Oklahoma State and Allen Bowman, and I was very thankful that we have Avery Johnson. Avery Johnson stunk too. Provo is a bad place to be at night. Wouldn't want to go there. Um, Except I would say pulled it off last year, so that worked out for them. So I don't know.
Did
Maybe that's
we
the
did.
state of the program, but shocking stuff. 'Cause I mean, going into the season, BYU wasn't supposed to be that good. Now they're 4-0, ranked in the top 25. They've gotten it done.
Yeah, and first half, K State had control. Brandon. I mean, they were fine. They were up 6-0 after the first quarter. They were up 6-3 late in the
Yeah,
first half. They were fine. I mean, BYU's defense, boy, they've made some improvements.
yeah,
And I don't think we've really respected that enough on this podcast. Is the offense I've really respected what they've been able to do. Their defense, though, did some big stuff. And I think, look, the Giddens fumble recovery and led to that score change the entire game. And Provo's a tough place to play. You're dead right, Brendan. And in the second half, K-State, they didn't listen to whatever speech Coach Kleiman and staff had at halftime. They were abysmal. That was 30. And you're right. If TCU didn't exist this week, we would be ripping this performance more. And we're still going to rip it because that's a top 15 team, a team that you and I have been very high on going into the season. And even if there was some shakiness at the quarterback position and all that, this is a team that should never lose by 29, road or home. Road is, I mean, home especially, but even on the road, I did not see this one coming. And as shocking as TCU was this week, this team I think could be I think still low key could be a college football playoff team. Then again, though, I'm not so sure anymore. And if they lose one more, they better pray they can find a way into
Yeah.
the conference championship game because they're done. There's no
Yeah.
question about it. They would be done if they lose again. And they don't have an easy. It's not an easy schedule. I
No.
mean, there's no gimmies. And I guarantee Kansas wants to end that long losing streak. I guarantee Iowa State's pretty hungry to keep going late November. So State's going to be walking a very fine line going forward.